Hello, everybody. How are you? Early morning hours here on a Saturday here in LA. Thought we'd take the time to shoot another video on a community spotlight for the LA area. This community is called La Habra, Habra. It means pass through the hills. It was one of the original cuts in the land that the Spanish used to move through the area when they sent a series of expeditions in the 1760s, late 1700s. And then, of course, it's grown since then. But that first pathway where the explorers came through and natives to the land would use to travel through, the Spanish quickly saw it as a business opportunity, and they set up what we might consider to be a interstate, like a truck stop. They set up a truck stop, but of course in those days it was horses and cattle and stagecoaches. But the land was developing rapidly from its sort of austere history. But as the country in the Southwest was moving forward from the late 1700s and early 1800s into the industrial age, well, local entrepreneurs saw this as a chance to take advantage of what they saw as the inevitable growth of travel through the pass. So they set up like basically what we would consider a truck stop or a travel center. And so you could, in those days, they had stagecoaches, people walking, people riding on the backs of cattle, riding horses, and you could get anything you needed at that point, right at La Habra. You could stay in a hotel. You could get food for your horse. You could get food for yourself. There was restaurants. There was bars. But the other thing that they sold was a lot of the things that you'll still see today. They sold unbelievably expensive trinkets and postcards and things that you could sell. So in other words, if you're coming from Boston and you wanted to be able to send a card, wish you were here, they sold those both in English and Spanish in the shops. But they were just crazy expensive. So if a regular postcard in those days was a penny, it cost you 20 cents to get a postcard from La Habra. And not only that, then you had to pay for the stamp. So you had to think about, all right, in those days they had a lot more brothers and sisters. You know, it's only recently that you've had families of one or two, or at most you see people with 3 kids these days. But in those days, especially Catholic families, they had 30, 40, 50 kids. So now, if you're traveling from Boston, from Philadelphia, from Chicago, and you've made your way to California, you're going through the La Habra Pass, and you want to send a postcard back east or back to the Midwest, maybe it's Akron, Ohio even. Well, if you have 40 or 50 brothers and sisters, how are you going to decide which one to send it to? Okay, and that even kind of raises the broader question of how are you going to accommodate all of those people at Christmas time? I mean, you're going to have, your family should have established a gift exchange, or what some people call a secret Santa. Because you can't possibly buy gifts for all of those people. Now you say, well, they'll be buying gifts for you. Well, sure. Give me a sweater that's too small. Give me a something that I can't use for, like an electric toothbrush, and they don't even have electric outlets in those days, right? I mean, give me nothing. None of the gifts that you get are any good. So why should you be buying the good gifts? Because you have taste and style and class. You're buying good gifts for your brothers and sisters, and they're buying you trash. I mean, you know, they got it at the second-hand store, the swap meet, the garage sale. Whereas you went to the store and laid down a pretty penny to get them something of value. Now, you didn't go crazy. There was a limit. They put a spending limit on the Christmas gifts. But, I mean, you know, that's the kind of thing where they say for a wedding, and they go, gifts are not needed. Or here's a better example. You go to some of these kids' parties, right? The kids will have a party. It's just 6-year-olds, 10-year-olds, 7-year-olds, whatever. And they invite all their friends and they go, gifts not needed. Well, what does everybody do? They bring a gift. Because they don't want to be the one parent that doesn't bring a gift and then their kid's going to cry like, why didn't we get a gift? And it's the same thing with some of these weddings. The gifts not needed. You go in and what's the first thing you see in the church or the reception area? It's a table or 2 tables or 5 tables full of gifts. And you look at your spouse or your girlfriend and vice versa, and they look at you and they're like, we didn't get a gift. Now, the secret to that is to carry a trunk full of gifts at all times. Have like 5 or 6 gifts ready to go, wrapped and ready to go. Now, I always recommend brass candlesticks as a catch-all. Everybody needs brass candlesticks. Candlesticks work at any faith, any marriage, any party, anything. Now, it may not be the best for us if you get invited to if your kid gets invited to a birthday party and you have to go over there because they can't drive themselves. And, you forget to get a gift and you pull out your brass candlesticks from the trunk. They might not be the best gift for their friends, their 8-year-old friends. Look what I got you, Sally, some brass candlesticks. And she might start sobbing right in front of her own party. Okay, right in front of her own, it's emotional trauma at that age. But at the same time, you saved face because you had something ready to go. But nonetheless, if you're going through the La Habra Pass in 1790, let's say, and you're trying to think, God, I got to spend 10 to 20 cents on the postcard, plus the postage, plus I probably got to buy feed for the Pony Express that's running it back. I probably got to chip in on the feed. And I know that the Pony Express guy, he's probably likes whiskey, so I probably have to get him a flask. I mean, now we're up to like $1.25. And in those days, guys, that was a fortune. Just to send a postcard back to Boston or Chicago or Philadelphia and say, hey, I made it to California, and I still haven't been to Disneyland. So those are the kind of services that were provided in La Habra. It was like the biggest truck stop of the age. It was like the travel center of your dreams. They had everything in there. You wanted to get if you had a stagecoach and you wanted to put a hitch on the back and pull a trailer, they had it. If you had a car that had a knock and a ping, if you had a stagecoach that was knocking and pinging and screeching and scratching and making whimpering noises at every rock in the road, they would throw it up on the lift, they'd grease it down, they'd fix it right there in La Habra, and you'd be back on your way, you'd be back on the way to LA just in time for the Academy Awards. So guys, that's the history of the area. So when you go through La Habra today, if you're driving through, just remember that you are going through the annals of history. You're driving in your 1997 Honda Accord that is still running after 275,000 miles, and it's the original engine. Sure, right around 205,000, you weren't sure it was going to make it because you bought it used from somebody that said they took care of it and had a clean Carfax, but how do you know they actually changed the oil unless they have the receipts? You don't. So you took a flyer because you figured, all right, the price is such that if it's not up to speed, if they haven't changed the oil, well, I'm going to start doing that, and I know that will limit the age of the engine overall, but I'm going to go for it because the price is so low. And so you immediately went down to the oil change place. You spent an outrageous amount of money for the high mileage oil. They advertise as $25 for an oil change. You didn't get out of there till 75 miles later. It's kind of like that. So if you're driving through La Habra today, just remember you're driving through the halls of history. That at one point the biggest travel center, also known as a truck stop in the world, was there in La Habra in 1780. You know how long ago that was? That was before the National Hockey League was formed. They didn't even have the NHL. They just would skate around on frozen lakes and shoot pucks at each other until all their teeth fell out of their head. Guys, it's an amazing thing. I hope this gives you some context about a great community in the LA area, La Habra. Don't forget, come on back because we're going to in one of the videos coming up soon, we're going to talk about a neighboring city called La Habra Heights, which is different. It sounds the same, but it's different. And so many more communities in that area. Come on back.